guys, my name is Attorney Walter, if not the third. We're going to be going straight to the White House, specifically when it comes to this article, the Biden-Harris administration, immediate priorities. Let's get right into it. President Biden will deliver bold action and immediate relief for American families, strong wording there, as the country grapples with converging crises. American families. What does that mean? Does it mean the American people? He didn't choose that. He chose American families. All right, next one. This will include actions to control the COVID-19 pandemic, provide economic relief, tackle climate change, and advance racial equity and civil rights, as well as immediate action to reform our immigration system and restore America's standing in the world. So we know right off the bat that when it comes to civil rights, this presidential system has been a bit lacking. The biggest unfortunate creation of the restriction and defiling of human rights has been the Biden administration, specifically with Afghanistan. Women 25 years and younger who have never known, unfortunately, being entangled in criminal activity that they're forced to do of any kind of nature, stealing, sexual nature, etc. I can't think of in the past 50 years an entire country losing the massive amount of women's rights that Afghanistan just has. So when it comes to America's standing in the world, that's blown. That's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen during his presidency. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say Republican, Democrat, but we have to be realistic here. It's blown. Immigration system. He changed a lot of stuff. It became broken again. As a result of that, he put Vice President Harris in charge of that. She was supposed to go down there. It took her forever to go down there. It's still not fixed. They're putting massive amount of funds into funding individuals coming into the United States, giving them monthly checks, transportation, etc. Our immigration system is totally demolished at this point, in the sense of what we had before. And what's sad about this is that, unfortunately, once again, women's rights, very important. Some of them are disabled women, but once again, women's rights are getting trampled. Because as these people are coming into this country, they're coming into this country by paying mules who basically use that, loan that they're going ahead and paying into this person, which puts them into some sort of camp work, some sort of labor work, some sort of manufacturing work, some sort of sexual orientation work, etc. It's not good. It's really bad. So unfortunately, America's standing in the world has just been destroyed because of the changeover of how women's rights will occur in Afghanistan, how women are coming into this country by using services of people that they have to take a loan with. So our immigration system, America's standing when it comes to protecting women's rights with that, absolutely destroyed, which pisses me off. My mother was one of the bell-ringing people, the whistle-blowing people, if you will, when it comes to women's rights and in the legal system against a massive, massive insurance company. Let's go up another line. Advance racial equality and civil rights, or racial equity and civil rights, because they've gotten away from equality, now they're into equity. Let's see what he's going to do there. Hopefully, this will be not a bunch of rules that are racially charged, that create more division among people who are... And it's sad, too, because racial equity, the whole idea here is to try and get, right, the idea is to get everybody, at some level or some chance of being at a level. And when I look at this stuff, the more and more I look at it, the Republicans had a huge change over the past 10, 15 years. They went from being this we need to support the potential of you becoming super wealthy. And when you're super wealthy, we're going to support you. And the Republicans kind of shifted. They became this well, we're not supporting the super wealthy because most of them are falling into the, hyper-liberal agenda, which is a lot of that whole, I'm going to show you value as a super rich person by virtue signaling that I care about people that are beneath my station in the economy. And so what happens is the Republican Party had to like shift and change into this other thing that they still haven't figured out what they really are. They don't really know. They had the prior president. He was not a Republican or a Democrat, so he kind of reshaped it in his image, which created almost like a cult-like activity. And that cult-like activity was based on some of the basic tenets of what the nation was founded on. And that's why it was so appeasing to so many people. The kicker is this. The Republican Party is no longer pushing this agenda of the super wealthy. It's more of like, how do we get people to be middle class and give them the potential to go up from there? That's what they've kind of shifted into. But on the other side, you have the Democrats. The Democrats used to be exactly that. They used to be about getting the low-income people into the middle-income category. That was like their big thing. We want to get impoverished people into low income into middle class, and that was like their main goal. They weren't super worried about the super wealthy because the super wealthy could obviously pay for themselves. It's always been the left's thing, right? We're not worried about the super rich. They're going to take care of themselves. But what's weird is that is no longer, it appears, based on the actions, not the words, the actions of the Democratic Party. It appears that the Democratic Party has shifted to be more oriented towards essentially making sure that the super low income and the homeless are taken care of. Immigrants, they're coming to this country. A lot of money is given to them, transportation, etc. So the super impoverished, that is their main focus. And when you think I'm on disability benefits, I'm super impoverished, actually, that's not their focal point. Their focal point is not the disabled individuals, from what we're seeing, right? Otherwise, the SSI Restoration Act would be in there. Otherwise, the Social Security 2100 Act would already be passed, and we'd have a system to go ahead and refund and build up money in the two big trust funds, the DI Trust Fund and the OASI Trust Fund for retirement. So the point is this. The only people that seem to be really benefiting from the Democrats' agenda are essentially the super lower individuals below people receiving retirement, below people receiving disability benefits, all the way down to those only receiving food stamps, and there was that big boost recently, and also those who are basically not having any money at all. Immigrants coming in that have nothing. I'm starting to have a political frame of crisis when I come to this whole situation of looking at what their priorities are, because, and don't get me wrong, the expectation is that when you have a vice president that's a female, that women's rights are going to be like way up here, right? That's boom, like top shelf. That's going to be the thing. But yet women's rights have in the past 50, I would say even 100 years. I mean, other than the Holocaust. Yeah, I mean, so okay, maybe so the Holocaust would be worse, but this is the next thing down when it comes to women's rights, because you took a freedom-based country and now you've essentially allowed a lot of people to be enslaved into this system of deity that essentially does not allow women to have the freedoms of not just American women, but like, go outside by yourself without a male, like all that stuff is coming back to these poor women, especially 25 and under. They don't even know that world. So what's concerning me is that the civil rights aspect of this presidency is blown. Now, with that said, it was Trump's gig to get all of the military out of Afghanistan. The military people that were behind him said, don't you dare do it. He didn't do it, and Biden came in and did it. This same thing, to some degree, could have happened with the prior president. I don't know the difference of how he would have done it. I know that there would have been, a slow take. It probably would have been more structured in the sense of like, okay, we're removing this city, we're moving away from this city, now we're moving away from this city. And if the Taliban would start to take, they would go right back in and take them out. Because that's the type of prior president he was. He was a hoorah president. So I think that my big overall review of this is that I'm not happy about where the state of women's rights are at. And I've always been a big fan of promoting the identity of women's rights. And, here's the thing. I've always been a big proponent of rights for, as you guys know, spaceconstitution.com. I want to literally build a platform to build future template constitutions that future space societies can use to say, okay, we want these rights, here's a template constitution, we're going to use that. Even when I was in college, a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want, gay people and this and that, and LGBTQ community. Actually, when I was in college, I built up, which was essentially, it was GET, Gay Entertainment Television. I was going to have that be a launch platform to give well, I wasn't going to actually run it for the most part. I was just going to set it up legally. But I was going to allow them to have their own TV station, have their own website and voice through that. Back when, because remember, now I'm getting a little bit older, back when you wouldn't have that. It didn't exist. And a lot of people go, oh, that's terrible, that's horrible. Is it? I mean, are they really hurting people that much by expressing who they are in that way? And a lot of people are like, oh, that's like the worst thing. It's not. It's not. It's allowing people to do things, within a certain way of doing it that is offensive to a lot of people within a certain, structure of how it should be. And so I've always been the rights guy. I've always been fighting for people's freedoms. And unfortunately, what I'm seeing with this presidency is a complete failure to the human race, specifically for women in Afghanistan and those women that are coming into America. There's a lot of ways that you can get immigrants to come legally into America and to support them. But having them be brought in the manner in which they are, where you have, en masse coyotes, you have, en masse illegal transportation, tunnel, what do you think those tunnels are used for? They're used for drug transportation and sex slave transportation. You know what I mean? Like, what do you think they're for? So, and keep in mind, we haven't even gotten to the main thing of this. All right, now let's go back to this. Advanced racial equity. The idea here is to advance races other than whites, right? But to proportionally advance them based on where they have not been successful. Right? So you would not essentially, based on where this is going, advance Asians as much as you would advance African Americans. You would not advance Indians that are, not Native Americans, but, Indians from, obviously, the state nation of India. That essentially would go ahead and you wouldn't raise them as much in equity as much as, say, American Indians who have been significantly oppressed. So the thing I have a problem with this idea of racial equity is that it's not race-based. They keep pushing this idea that race, you are incapable of doing a job because of the color of your skin. Right? That's what they're saying here. They're saying that because of your race, you are not competent enough. You are not intelligent enough. You're not capable. And we know that's not true. We know that every single race has the capacity to have the smartest person on Earth. That's the most beautiful thing, is that there's no superior race. There never will be a superior race, because the next generation will come along and a person with a different color skin will be the smartest person with the highest IQ, with the most amazing products, with the most amazing this, making the most money, etc. That's how it works. You have congregations of certain races in certain areas. China has a significant amount of Asians, right? Russia has a significant amount of Caucasians, right? India, significant amount of Indians. Africa, significant amount of African Americans, right? Or we would just call them, black skin, brown skin, essential individuals. So the point here is really this. Racial equity is not what we need. We need geographic equity. That is where you look at a geographic area that is suffering, okay? And you say, why is this area suffering? It's not because they're of a particular race. It's because the culture there is creating a negative environment. That's the politics there. That's the jobs that are available there. That's the education that's available there. That's the parental, how the parents are raising their kids there. It's not about the color of your skin. It's specifically about the geographic area and what the culture is. The school, the police, the jobs, the academia, etc. It's the culture of that has to be fixed. There's no reason you couldn't take the poorest town, right? The poorest town that has the most crime and turn it around in one generation into being one of the wealthiest towns. Especially with the 3.5, I mean, geez, it's a 3.5 trillion. A number so big, it's literally hard to line up the numbers in your brain. You know, if you sit there and just focus, you can do it. But if you're just saying it's hard to do. Like 1,000, okay, but 3.5 trillion, it's hard to line up how many zeros that is in your brain just by thinking it. So I think racial equity is the exact opposite of what America needs. I think the Constitution has evolved to specifically be against having things like racial equity, in the sense of saying, well, these people, because of the color of their skin, well, they can't do what they need to do, so we're going to have to hyperfund this area to magically get them to where they need to be as a people with this skin color. That's wrong. It's geography, guys. Think geography equity. That is the solution. That's it. You got to change the culture, the academia, the rights, the everything. You got to make it better so that I can thrive. You got to think of that little area as a business that you need to revive. That's it. That's what you're doing. All right, next one. Civil rights. Oh, we already talked about that. That is total destruction right now. Climate change. Climate change is a very tough thing. I don't go into it a lot because, to be honest with you, I've read different scientific articles on it about how things are heating things up. And one thing that I never hear in there, which I thought would be attacked right up front, would be essentially heavy fuel versus diesel fuel versus gasoline fuel used on heavy tanker ships and, basically transport ships. Because a lot of the massive amount of exhaust going into the atmosphere comes from those mega ships. So the expectation is that you would think that with all of that space, they could just line up lithium battery after lithium battery and go ahead and power the engine off of that. But they don't. And once they get into international waters, they switch to heavy fuel, which is just horrific for the, climate. They don't change that, though, because it's cheap. And cheap products makes people happy. So they try to force people into this idea of we have to go green. But yet they don't really... It's like when they go, oh, solar panels. Oh, wind turbines. It's fusion, guys. It's all about fusion. If we can figure out how to do fusion properly, that's it. Thermosball fusion, how the sun works. You put it in a thermosball size container, or even smaller. It'll power a house for the life of the earth. You put it into a car, it'll power the car for the life of the earth. You know what I mean? Like that's the thing. It's you wonder why these massive ships of war, the U.S. Navy fleet, uses a nuclear power source. That's why, because solar is not going to power an aircraft carrier. It's just not. We don't have the technology, and we're not even close to that technology. We are closer to fusion than essentially we are to solar panels powering the full capacity and strength of an aircraft carrier. All right. Let's go into specifically these things right here, and then obviously the COVID-19 pandemic. He's doing a lot of what he can there. Let's go into specifically because it's the first one on the write-up. Okay. COVID-19. President Biden will move quickly to contain the COVID-19 crisis by expanding testing, safely reopening schools and businesses, and taking science-driven steps to address the communities, especially communities of color. It's always the thing of communities in color. It's a geography thing, not the color of your skin. Okay? And when I read this, the first thing I think of is African American or Latino or an individual who basically is part of the traditional American oppressed groups, right? The oppressed groups. It's a geography thing at this point. It is not a color of skin thing. And here's the basic proof of that. Especially communities of color. Right? These communities of color that used to be congregations of only those, types of families, that's not how it is anymore. I'm a person that goes and works with the homeless all the time. Go into those communities, you're going to see every single race in those communities now. You know why? Because there's poor people of every single race. When they say, oh, it's across the train tracks and the train, that's all the black community there. It's not. Because guess what? There's poor people of every skin color. And they all live in those communities now. But if you, as a person, don't believe me, by all means, go drive into them. Go check them out. Go walk through them. Check them out. You're going to see that there's different, skin colors all throughout them, because it is not... they're looking at this like each community is its own little country, right? That's Chinatown, that's African American town, etc. That's not how it works anymore. All right, next thing. Who have been hit hardest by the virus. Okay, so he's saying African Americans, Latinos who have been hardest hit by the virus. And President Biden will launch a national vaccination program to inoculate the U.S. population efficiently and equitably, right? They love this word, equitable. All right, climate. President Biden will take swift action to tackle the climate emergency. The Biden administration will ensure we meet the demands of science while empowering American workers and businesses to lead a clean energy revolution. That's it. That's all it says. That's it. Racial equity. The promise of our nation is that every American has an equal chance to get ahead, yet persistent, systematic racism and barriers to opportunity have denied this promise for so many. President Biden is putting equity at the center of the agenda with a whole of government approach to embed racial justice across federal agencies, policies, and programs. And President Biden will take bold action to advance a comprehensive equity agenda to deliver criminal justice reform, end disparities in healthcare access and education, strengthen fair housing, and restore federal respect for tribal sovereignty, among other actions, so that everyone across America has the opportunity to fulfill their potential. Now, there were two big things here. I don't know if you caught it. The first thing was, for those people who are of a different skin color than white, he wants to go ahead and put a lot of federal funding to find ways to advance those people essentially to the level of whatever the middle ground is for whites, just to get them to the middle ground, right? That's what this is saying. Advance them so that they have a chance to get to the equitable middle ground. If they go beyond that, amazing. But we want to, get them to the equitable middle ground so long as they're not white. What he's also saying here, and this is the big part too, is that we have to have federal respect for tribal sovereignty. Tribal, almost always in reference to, in majority, specifically Native Americans. Who lost the most in this country? Caucasians? The Spanish who had taken it over? African Americans who came here as slaves? Or the people who owned the land, worked the land, were enslaved on their own land, were murdered on their own land, were then forced to go live and granted land that was mostly barren at that time? Well, that would obviously be the Native Americans. America, and this is not a popular thing, but I'm going to say it, essentially did to the Native Americans what the Nazis did to, for example, the Jewish people. This is the bottom line. And we don't look at it that way in America because we don't want to put that on our shoulders. But the reality is that if you think about, okay, what did the Hitler, the SS, the Nazi, what did they do to essentially the Jewish people? Well, they took away their rights. They took away how people look at them, right? They put a patch on their arm. They would tattoo their body. They would take away the humanistic tendency of how we view a person. That's what they took away from them. That way people were accepting of treating them like animals, right? That was the first step to go ahead and change the system of how people look at that. Sweetie's in the background complaining. Sweetie. So the point here is this. How is that? I know you could always pick out the little things here and there, but in a general scope, in a macro scope, how is that different than what happened to essentially the Native Americans? We came here, we gave them a bunch of viruses, it was terrible, they got sick. They had to keep moving and moving and moving because we kept encroaching and building. We kept fighting them, pushing them back. We kept taking over their land. Sweetie. So, my point to you guys is this. I'm glad to see tribal sovereignty mentioned here. This is unique from anybody, the prior thing they stated, which is anybody that's not white is going to get a boost, right, to achieve equity unless they're already doing super great on Martha's Vineyard, whatever. So what I see here is I'm really proud and happy that President Biden specifically put in tribal sovereignty, because that is a group that has struggled, that has been oppressed, that has been pushed into the corner, that has been They've been giving certain special additional rights, and some have flourished with that. But I mean, America committed the genocide against the tribal people that were here as natives to the soil that we all live on. Prove me wrong. They were here first. We all know the stories. We all know the background. We know the cutesy one that comes up in the pop-up book. And if you ever get a chance to actually learn the history behind it, it is extremely graphic. So I just want to point that out. Economy. President Biden will take bold steps to address the inequities in our economy and provide relief to those who are struggling during the COVID-19 pandemic. The president will also work with Congress to pass the American Rescue Plan to change the course of the pandemic, build a bridge towards economic recovery, and invest in racial justice. So notice how he said there racial justice and not racial equity. Because there, it changed. He wanted to have essentially justice, which is usually viewed when it comes to this political fact sheet write-up stuff as make whole, right? To make somebody whole. That's the usual personal injury claim. How do we make this person whole again? Well, they went through a horrible car accident. They missed all this work. They couldn't do this. We give them a big thing of cash, right? How do we make them whole again? That's different than equity. Equity, when it comes to the economy, is bringing them all up to the middle. Justice is making them whole and giving them potentially even more than the middle. So that's interesting there. The words that are used here, they were specifically chosen. All right, let's keep going through this. And remember too, I live as a human slave because every month I pay student loans that are more than most of your benefits that you're getting per month. Like I have to pay more than the benefits you receive, almost all of you guys, in student loans every single month. Why is that? Because white male old politicians back in the day voted to allow essentially student loans, and the Supreme Court had to come and change the politicians and not allow them to do certain things, but they allowed universities to basically put more of that burden on Caucasians, people with this skin. Didn't get to choose what I was born with. This is what I was born with. But because I have white skin, I had to take out significantly higher student loans because my student loans were paying for other people that basically didn't have to pay as much. Starting to see the racist injustice that's occurring here. Starting to see how the student loan thing is really a racial problem, but nobody looks at it that way. All right, let's keep going. And the reason I do this with you guys is so that you can kind of see from somebody who lived through it what's going on here. And I know that it's hard to think at the moment, like, I thought, African Americans were poor. I thought they couldn't figure out how to get to the DMV to go ahead and get a license. But now, as we continue to evolve as Americans, we realize how moronic that is and how capable all these other than white people are. The brightest people on one of my heroes specifically did a lot of work with NASA. I'm not going to call him out with this thing, but one of my heroes when it comes to space travel, space integration, the thing that was, I remember the first time he came out with something and he was doing a speech about, he's an African American, but he was talking about space and he was talking about why would we have to move to, basically figure out how to grow crops and get the planet ready to go ahead and have breathable air. Why would we do that if we had the technology to do that, we would just do it to Earth. That was one of his earlier ones, and I always enjoyed, he's such a great speech. But my point is this, African American, brighter than me, totally brilliant individual. It's a geography thing. It's a culture thing within that geography. It's the jobs, it's the academia. It is not a race-oriented thing. And if you start to think like that, what happens is you start to actually address how to change that geographic area with how they do stuff. And you think, okay, well, how do we get this geographic area to be as successful as this geographic area? It's not by changing the color of their skin. It's by changing the schooling, the businesses that are available with employment. It's by changing the vocational tendencies of how people look at jobs that they could potentially do. It's by changing how the parents raise their children. It's by changing those things. Okay, let's go to this. And he will build. All right, now this is interesting. You never start a sentence with and. And he goes, and invest in racial justice, period. And, comma, you never do that. So whoever wrote this, it's late for me. Whoever wrote this, you would never start a sentence with and. That is considered very, very low. You would never do that. And you never start it with and, comma. And, comma, he will build our economy back better from the pandemic. And, with no comma, create millions of jobs by strengthening small businesses and investing in the jobs of the future. I'm a little worried with this because when Obama came out with a lot of the funding towards green companies, most of those green companies went out of business. And they were, a couple of them, tied directly to investments that he had going into, his running for president. One of the best ones, though, a company for green technology, was actually purchased by China. And that was one of the few successful ones. So we lost that company in that sense. But just be aware that this could be a potential problem here, a potential funneling of money situation like we had with that presidency that came before the prior one. Healthcare. President Biden will make a renewed commitment to protect and expand Americans' access to quality, affordable healthcare. He will build on the Affordable Care Act to meet the healthcare needs created by the pandemic, reduce healthcare costs, and make our healthcare system less complex to navigate. So the problem I have with this is that my insurance just went from $300 and something per month to $500 and something per month because I'm 35 now. And the problem with that is that they have made it extremely expensive for somebody like me to have health insurance. So I'm going to be just getting a health insurance that is more affordable. Because what's happening is all of these different health insurance options that are out there, they give me very little and charge a heck of a lot. And then to use them, I have to spend this much. So I haven't seen this Affordable Health Care Act, this Affordable Health Care system. I haven't actually seen it, to be honest, be magic. If anything, it was slightly better for a short period, but it failed the number one thing it was supposed to do, which was to go ahead, very important here, which was to go ahead and make it so that everybody was paying into it, and because they were paying into it, the homeless could get free health care, a sort of Medicare for all situation. That was the whole point of it when they first, posted it up. It did not meet that standard at all. I'm not saying it's terrible. Some people are getting covered for things that they normally wouldn't. Obviously, there's going to be somebody in the text chat going, oh, but da-da-da, and it saved my life. I know that. Obviously, we all know that. But please understand, the basic premise of this program was not met when it finally became law. Immigration. President Biden will reform our long broken and chaotic immigration system. President Biden's strategy is centered on the basic premise that our country is safer, stronger, and more prosperous with a fair and orderly immigration system that welcomes immigrants, keeps families together, and allows people across the country, both newly arrived immigrants and people who have lived here for generations, to more fully contribute to our country. Sadly, it appears that the crimes, and not just crimes, but the violent crimes, are going up that are immigrant-based. That's not to say that immigrants are bad. I want to say something to you guys. A lot of people are going, oh, immigrants this, immigrants that. That's not. We need immigrants to grow as a country because whether you like it or not, America is a farm and we are its animals. And the bottom line is that America needs lots of animals to make lots of money so that they can tax lots of that money. So the more people we have in this country, the more taxable income there is to go ahead and spend on things which should be spent on things like boosting and investing into the trust funds of the Social Security Administration. But instead, what we have is a system where essentially we have all these pet projects and money going to foreign countries. So the inherent problem here is that immigrants are not the problem. Immigrants are the solution for America striving forward. People are not having enough kids right now to have enough humans being created to keep the farm running as it should. They're going to have to use immigrants. That is a mathematical requirement of this country to grow. And when you say it like that, you're like, well, for a country to grow, you need more people. That makes sense. Okay, I got it. But it's required for the amount of work product that we need, for the amount of taxation dollars that'll come out of it, to go ahead and make this thing work. The final one, restoring America's global standing. President Biden will take steps to restore America's standing in the world, strengthening the U.S. national security workforce, rebuilding democratic alliances across the globe, championing... Oh my God. and I haven't read this yet. I read it with you guys. Championing America's values and human rights and equipping the American middle class to succeed in a global economy. Let's go through it. We'll do it quickly. America's standing. Okay. Restore America's standing in the world. Nobody takes us seriously as a military threat now. The Taliban, a terrorist organization, just overthrew us. Strengthening the U.S. national security workforce. Maybe he's done things. I haven't seen anything. Rebuilding democratic alliances across the globe. Well, you just blew away an entire country of democracy-based government. Championing America's values and human rights. Women. Like, if there was a Star Wars figure that was sitting there watching Afghanistan turn, what you would see is them cradle their head and say that there's been a great shift in the force. Something terrible has happened. And that's because you took a country accustomed to somewhat similar to American values, and you wiped that out in a very short period. And equip the American middle class to succeed in a global economy. What's interesting is, like, okay, we're going to make things to sell to other people, right? We're going to make money to buy things from other people. I mean, I think Alibaba, eBay, Amazon have done more for equipping the American middle class to succeed in a global economy by buying other people's stuff, selling our stuff to other countries. I haven't seen this yet. Maybe it's in the infrastructure bill for more international interaction, but what I'm seeing from that is more taxation for things that some people were getting away from taxation with that were global trades. So it's actually, there's a hindrance being put on it than essentially equipping the American middle class to succeed in a global economy. This is the Biden-Harris administration immediate priorities. That's what's in it. One of the largest things in what the president promised prior to becoming president, pre-White House website, campaign website, was that he was going to do all of these things for Social Security disability benefits, Social Security in general, retirement, AUX benefits, DAC benefits, etc. None of those has happened yet. None of them have happened yet. I strongly hope, and I know that he's got hurricanes coming up, I know he's got Lambda variant potential being an issue, and he's still dealing with Delta, and Afghanistan is a total miserable situation. But he promised, and it is incredibly important that the legislature act, because the trust funds will run low and people won't get their full amount if they don't start legislating immediately. I want you to understand something too. The Social Security Administration can't create law. So they can't fix the loss/lack of money in these trust funds. They can't do it. It is not within their ability to shapeshift the agency and create law that changes everything. They don't have that ability. Only the House, Senate, and President combined can do that. If you are not worried about these trust funds running low, please immediately start worrying. Start researching it, start learning it. The number one thing, in my opinion, that should be at the top of this, COVID-19. Directly followed by fixing the Social Security trust fund problem. Then I would probably put fixing the economy, then healthcare, then immigration. Restoring America's global standing isn't going to happen anymore. Racial equity, geographic equity is what we should be having there. And then climate would be the last one because we can't even afford it right now. But we should still do what we can to help the earth. Would I do things differently? Just like all of you, you would do things differently. It's tough when you're the president. You've got all these people trying to tell you things, opinions, suggestions. Some are truthful, some are not. Some is subjective, some is Who knows where the evidence came from? What I'd like you to think about is many of those categories have gotten worse. What are you going to do to ensure that you're safe? Disabled people and retired people are special classes of individuals that are more likely to be easily harmed, pulled out of their routine. You upset their financial situation, their huge tizzies, bad situation, they can't get back on track. You upset the routine when it comes to travel, huge tizzy, huge problem, you can't get them back on track with little effort. It takes a lot of effort. I want you to start thinking about what you need to be safe and start investing into those things. Whether it's a backup of a medical device that you have, so you have 2 of them, whether it's a generator, backup resources such as food, a toolkit, extra flashlights, whatever. I want you to start thinking about those things. There's all these other channels out there pushing this agenda of wow this and wow that. I've been the person who has consistently delivered to you the statements and the facts and the financials of what's going on. And there's a problem. And nobody is sponsoring me. No, literally nobody has sponsored me with any product. Nobody's given me a product to sell to you guys other than soap. One time a guy sponsored me by letting me buy soap cheaper, and I said, hey, I'll go ahead and make some advertisements on it by just saying the name of it. Soap, you might need that. But very importantly, there's all kinds of things that I just start learning about it, because when the dollar goes up significantly and the cost of food rises significantly, the value of the dollar decreases significantly, when other countries keep playing games with the U.S., flying their military planes very close to ours, etc., there's a problem here. And we don't know if America has what it needs to succeed. And because of that, all I can say is you can't change the government in the sense of making them change all this stuff to be better. But you can change your basic lifestyle to prepare yourself in case a bad situation happens. Anyways, guys, we've talked enough. Have a wonderful night. Attorney Walter Knott. If this channel has helped you in any way, please like, subscribe, etc. And remember, I go live every Thursday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube. You can call in with the phone number below. It's where I donate 2 hours every single week to help people with questions about disability law. I'll catch you later. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.